Welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. I want to thank everyone who's here for continuing to engage in the conversation, to listen, to learn, to not be afraid to examine hard topics. And I try and cover the hard stuff. Right? There's enough softball bullcrap out there. There's enough pandering to weak-minded people who want to see the world through Pollyannish, rose-colored, naive glasses, right? It's just that kind of a world that we live in where reality does exist, but we don't want to talk about that. We want to demand a different kind of world. I refuse to live in that world. I refuse to accept that some sort of neo-Orwellian New World, Brave New World can exist. I don't. As much as the world that we live in has become softer and kinder, or at least the appearance and desire for it, is soft and is good and is advanced technologically, and in other ways we've become aware that tyranny in governments is not a good way to go. Yet, what do we have? Tyrannical governments. Right? We've been told that technology is going to solve our problems, but it hasn't. And having an open mind and showing love and kindness towards others is going to cause them to show love and kindness to us. Well, it doesn't. Right? It just doesn't. Reality is reality. Now, this video I'm going to do is not, it's not, N-O-T, it's not about racism. It's not about race. It's not about skin color. It's not about another culture. It's not about another religion. And you can read those things into it if you want. You can dismiss those things if you want. You can ignore those elements if you want. It's completely up to you. But for me, this story has nothing to do with any of that. It doesn't have to do with gender or gender identification. It doesn't have to do with misogyny or patriarchy. It has nothing to do with any of that. All of those are human creations. When you boil us down, when you boil all of that crap down, right, get it the hell out of the way, you're left with raw human beings. Whether their gender's male or female doesn't matter. You end up with raw human beings. And this is really the foundation and the place I like to look at human behavior from. Right? We have motivations which can take a broad look and then refine them down for political or social or some other type of focus. But for me, I like to start with the concept of raw human beings. Probably the absolute worst place that the left ever wants to hear me talk about. Because I'll say things like, this is what men do, and this is what women do, and this is what men are, and this is what women are. Right? But on top of those basics, base creatures, beings, we start adding our social constructs and our ideas, our religions, and everything else. We add those to it. So, I've spent 4 minutes setting this up. There's an article, news story that came out about the 9 people that were killed down in Mexico. Right? I believe it was 3 women and 6 kids were brutally murdered by a drug cartel, according to the story I read. And then they were set on fire and left in their van. Now, there are many, many, many things that I see wrong that led up to this point. Right? Ignoring the reality of basic human nature. And there is a shit hits the fan point to all of this, and that is when shit hits the fan, we will all be resorting to our base human nature and the ability, or rather the exercise of being a prepper is what is going to allow you and me and others to maintain our humanity. We won't be taken to the base because we'll have those Pavlovian needs met. Food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, and a means of self-defense. We won't be barbarians, you and I as preppers. While many others that are left will become those primal humans operating under the most basic conditions and fundamental needs to survive. But we've seen examples of how it plays out even in today's modern world, and that's why I brought this news story up. Not for tragic sensationalism, but to make a point about basic human nature. And that without those safeguards in place, safeguards like our basic needs, food, water, shelter, clothing, etc. Without those things in place, the fundamental needs for day-to-day survival are in there. And without some of the other elements that human society has put into this Maslowian pyramid, without them, without those restrictions, the basic human need and desire is resorted to. Even with people who have food and water, if they see that someone else has something that they could use, say tomorrow or the next day, they believe that an opportunity has arisen that they should take from others, that they can hurt others, that there's no consequence for this. Right? And this is what animals do. Literal animals. The people that did this to these women and children are acting fundamentally as animals. They have no social, no religious, no cultural, no political. They have no inhibitions. It is take what you can when you can, every chance you can, as if they were pure animals. And even if they have a full belly and water, the basic human animal knows that it's going to run out, that tomorrow it will be hungry, that opportunities don't come every single day, and that when an opportunity presents itself, you take it. When shit hits the fan, it is my belief and understanding that it'll take a while. Day 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, as people get hungrier, more desperate, as they look to the future and see none. Now, this isn't for the entire world, but just individuals. There's going to be people that are going to be doing just fine in certain parts of the country and certain parts of the world. Other places will become arenas of desperation. Absolute desperation. And they'll think, and they'll get there to where they are reduced to base animals, relying on their cunning and seizing on every opportunity. And that's where I'll refer back to this story. This story is not unique, and people need to understand that. This is not unique to drug cartels. This is not unique to North America or Mexico or Central America. This is not unique to the basic social belief system or cultural belief system of just Mexico. This is not unique, and I know Mexico is largely Catholic. This is the opposite of what Catholics want, yet it's here. You see, they throw off these animals I'm talking about. They throw off everything that would restrict them. What is happening here can be found all over the internet. It can be found everywhere in third world countries. That naive, ridiculous Americans, as well as people from other countries, Sweden, Europe, Canada, Australia, they think they can, with impunity, travel to other countries. And I'm going to go down this road for a while and see what's there. not understanding that they are sheep amongst wolves. Now, that may have some sort of biblical story. Oh yeah, be a sheep amongst wolves, or be a sheep amongst lions. Some making up some story. Well, if I act really, if I show love and compassion and this and that, everyone will show that to me. No, that's not how it works. You cannot walk into a lion's den unless your name is Daniel and about 4,000 years ago. You cannot walk into a lion's den and say, I'm a sheep, don't eat me. You can't walk into a lion's den and say, I'm a lion, don't eat me. The lion sees you, you are not a lion. The lion tests things out in its mind, and then it kills. It pounces. It does what a lion does. Lions can be trained, can they not? Jump through hoops, right? Respond to a lion trainer with a chair and a whip, right? They can jump. They can do tricks, right? That's not what a lion is. It's not what a lion is, and it's not what a lion does. Same with any other animal that has a vicious base nature. Humans have a vicious base nature. Like a lion in a zoo, you can feed them a lot of meat, you can handle them a lot, and they'll be relatively nice unless that instinct takes over and that need. And that's what we saw here in Mexico and everywhere around the world. These idiots, whether they're my generation or millennials or Gen Z, it doesn't matter. You can travel to another country, and the moment one of these humans that is a base animal shows up, they will victimize you. Even me at 270 pounds, giant, white, muscle-bound, pissed off, well-trained individual, I'm not going to go out into the wilderness and think I can hike along a road in Afghanistan or Pakistan or India or Kashmir or anywhere in Africa where I think I can just walk where I want because I have two legs and I believe it in my head. I would be killed just as quickly. But there are example after example after example, especially of women thinking they can do this, even groups of women. They end up getting murdered, and more often than not, raped and then murdered. And the ones that aren't killed, that are just raped, how much you want to bet? There's no one to tell. There's no one to complain to. They've been victimized. You know, these people that are in the news today being talked about, they were flat out murdered. You know, you might call it a sport killing. And yes, animals do kill for sport. People go, oh, animals always eat. No, they don't. They kill for sport quite often, or at least many types of animals do. The animals down there, south of the border, they killed for sport. Now, what's interesting is this happened just south of the border of the United States. And these are the people that Democrats want to allow into our country with an open border policy where they can go back and forth with impunity, without being checked, without being understood who they are or what they're doing. This is exactly why we need a wall. This is exactly why we need our military protecting our border, so that we have some semblance of a place where we do live and exist, where our needs are met, and where we have some social restrictions, and some legal restrictions, and some religious restrictions. You know, basically a behavior program in us. All around the world, what happened down in Mexico happens all the time. Except in other countries that are more poor, they won't burn a van. You know, they'll steal the van. They'll rape the women. They'll kill everybody sometimes to hide their crime. Because when someone's dead, they tell no tales. Right? Poof, gone. They can't get in trouble for it. Even in their backward ass, barbarous countries, the criminals know they're criminals, but they'll do it Yeah, there are laws, there are social rules, there are religious restrictions that they're aware of, but they choose to come down to this base level. And once again, when shit hits the fan, how long, this is the big question, how long do you think it'll take before people get there? Now let's talk about my favorite groups to discuss, the commie left. The communist left, they're going to start up here and they're going to work their way down to base human behavior. But how are they going to start? When shit hits the fan, whether they cause it or it happens and then they respond, they're going to come out and start killing people that they disagree with on political grounds. If they aren't killed, they'll continue to do what they do, punishing others, taking from others, because they have a political belief, a political ideology, that communism is best, and that if you're not one of them, you're against them, and therefore you must die. You must be punished. You must have your stuff taken from you. But as they go down, as time progresses and shit hits the fan, the little commies that have lived, right, avoided being shot, they've proven a couple things. They're a little more discerning, they're a little more clever, they're a little more cautious about their business. But if things don't stop, right, if the shit hits the fan isn't stopped right away and it continues kind of sideways, less government to no government, poor resource availability, right, continuing conflict between individuals, these communists are going to what? They're going to say, well, I know how to kill, I know how to steal, I know how to victimize people, I know how to shop it, right? Know how to shop for a victim. They'll become more efficient killers. They'll become more efficient at what they do because they've already proven that being a little bit smart and careful and prudent about being the base human they are works well. In other words, they'll become refined predators. Refined predators. Right? This idea that only the strong survive or the most strong survive. We see that play out in other countries with people like these poor victims down in Mexico. There are some very refined predators in place. And they did what they did because that is what a refined predator does. So shit hits the fan is going to do just that. Just like I boiled off all of the thinking and said, what are we dealing with when shit hits the fan? We're dealing with a basic human with basic human needs and the skills to survive at that level. Shit hitting the fan is going to do just that. Unless you are a prepper and you've got a good moral base, a political sense of what's right, a social sense of what's right, a moral sense of what's right, and the ability to sustain yourself at that level, you won't be boiled down to nothing, to a raw being that wants to hurt others. Right? Imagine all of the vets out there, all of the strong people, and how they could hurt others if they didn't have any moral or other compunction. Right? When shit hits the fan, if people don't have preps, what are they going to resort to? We have examples of this in Venezuela. We have video examples of people killing farm animals, zoo animals. We have a video of people in scenes that mimic the road warrior harassing and haranguing a delivery truck until he crashes, and then they are plundered. They are just completely fallen upon like carrion on a carcass and start picking it to pieces and stealing. That's the level of desperation. And don't think that those three were the only three out there. This happens every single day. The idea that Venezuela is some sort of happy place, they're living through shit hits the fan every day. Every single day. And I heard months ago, oh, it's getting better now. I go, oh, what? Inflation? Inflation isn't a stagnant rate. Inflation is a continuing fall. Right? If the currency is still at 1,000,000 to 1 loss from where it started, it is still in shit it's the fan. Just because maybe it's plateaued out at 1,000,000 or 2,000,000 or 3,000,000%, that's still garbage, right? It's just proven that that's the bottom, right? You take a wheelbarrow full of money to get a cup of coffee, you're being rewarded for the exercise of moving that much money to get a cup of coffee. Not that the money has any value, but the work you put into moving it from one place to the other finally gives it some value. But this idea that we are at our core a very poor example of an intelligent being, with the exception of saying the most intelligent among them will take from others. We've seen this play out in movies. There are great examples in movies of a completely dystopian world that is reduced to just a very small percentage of beings left. You know, the Book of Eli or Walking Dead are great examples of that. You know, cinematic or Hollywood trying to represent it for our entertainment purposes. You know, but I think this example of the people being killed over in Mexico a couple of days ago, I think that is a perfect example of what reality is and what reality does. It is just horrifying to consider. You know, being fallen upon by predators. You know, and I'm not a perfect human being. I'm not sinless, right? I've done bad things, but I've never robbed somebody. I've never assaulted somebody. I've never murdered anybody, right? I've never burned a human being in order to hide a crime. I mean, what happened there are just the most brutal things. And it's important for us to understand that even though we probably won't be doing those things when shit hits the fan, others will. And because that behavior is going to be going on out there, it's going to cause other human beings out there to behave in a certain type of way. A certain type of way. People are going to try to maintain their humanity. They're going to try. But it's not going to be pretty. And like I said, I pray, and I've been thinking we're going to have a shit it's the fan light rather than the Mad Max world that I originally imagined that we would all revert to. All meaning we, meaning the whole world, every country, that it would revert down to that it would have to be reduced down to that lowest level everywhere for God knows how many years in order to start building again. I'm thinking we don't have to be that bad. I'm thinking that there's a possibility that we can have some resets, some do-overs, some bad things happen to teach some very important lessons to everybody. But you never know. We have to be prepared to the best of our ability for everything. One of the things that I think is important for our plan is to realize now that this, what happened to these people, is a level that everyone is capable of being subjected to. I'm not saying everyone's capable of doing that, because I don't believe that. But I do believe that we all can be subjected to this sort of treatment by others who do fall to that very low level. And that the people who start at the top, like these Antifa types and communists, they are the ones most capable of falling the furthest and being capable and willing to do the most dastardly, despicable, abominable crimes. Because history has shown us the most criminal of ideologies produces the most criminal behavior. Communists kill hundreds of millions, or over 100 million at least. We know that between China and Russia, they have done that. And other communist nations as well. What are other criminal factions or ideologies? Well, the criminal gang ideology. We can look, okay, here's a great example in Mexico. The drug cartel. Just like communists, They have no problem killing at the top level. That is a top consideration of their modus operandi, their MO. Their SOP, standard operating procedure, is to kill, to incite fear and terror and response. In other words, do what they say or else. Now, I started with communism, said drug cartel. Governments today, and I'm including the United States, I'm including all of the so-called civilized governments in Europe. Their law enforcement, or the government's will, what the government will, it uses an enforcement mechanism to get it. And so they pay people money. They hire thugs to kill and steal from others. And they use their justification, which is, well, it's the law, and we said it's the law, and you must obey the law, or you can be arrested or killed and then tried and then put in jail. Now, I'm not saying everyone in government is bad. I'm not saying that government isn't needed and doesn't have a purpose. But I'm saying let's realistically and objectively take a look at what government does. They may claim morality and claim the right, but the result is people are injured and hurt and stolen from. Right? It is very similar to this base idea that there is a need and a desire for future sustenance. And so government, drug cartels, communists, they will resort to those methods of violence and terror. That is why when we say shit could hit the fan, we consider government a potential threat. Government is a potential threat. It's armed and it has needs. Drug cartels, potential threat. They're armed and they have needs. Communists, they are armed and they have their needs. Other people, small groups, individuals, packs, they can be armed and have needs. That is why defense is such a big part of every prepper's plan. And it should be every part of every prepper's mentality. To understand that even if we're fortunate enough not to face a physical attack, right? Whether it's with sticks, stones, knives, or bullets, we face that potential. And I pray that none of us have to. That we're all wise enough and smart enough to keep ourselves out of those situations. But understanding that even if it's not happening to us, that it is happening out there. And that out there, the mentality is one that is going to ratchet lower and lower. And being naive, like these people who travel in other countries on foot or in a van, not in a tourist group, but even tourist groups are attacked and robbed and murdered. And being in a group of 9 and having children apparently didn't dissuade the criminal element and desire to commit this crime, right? It is the reality of human nature. And I hope that everyone has seen this has nothing to do with race, religion, culture, skin, whatever, right? Gender identity. This video is just about base human nature. And what happens when people decide to put aside everything, right? And just say, I'm going to satisfy those basic needs. It's a scary world. Being prepared is the best we can do. Putting yourself in a safe or the safest environment is the best we can do. Right? I recommend prayer. Always good. Helps us feel good. Actually, I think works and gets things done. But it's putting your mind to it, but also understanding, right, that there is, if you abandon your thinking and apply the nice guy mentality to what others are doing out here as the system comes down, as things get worse, you're going to be putting yourself in a position to become a victim. Much like these poor people that were murdered down here. And much like all of the poor men and women around the world who are stolen, murdered, raped, victimized, etc. All around the world. Because they refuse to accept what reality is, and they keep this high-minded ideal that, well, I've got good karma, and shouldn't I be able to walk where I want? And if I'm a nice person, everyone will just feel my vibes. And if I'm a non-threatening human, then it's okay. They'll realize I'm not a threat to them. They see I'm not a threat as there's an easy target. That is why you have to have a defensive ability, training, and plans to understand I need to defend myself. And if I don't look like a soft target when shit hits the fan, odds are I'll be left alone. And if I'm not a soft target, meaning I have the ability to defend myself, and I have a plan, and I've actually taken the time to do some training, put some thought to stuff, right? The odds of me surviving someone's attempt or feelers, right? They may not just come at you with a full assault, but they may test us. If they test us and realize that's a hard target, I'm going to go somewhere else. You have a chance to bring yourself, your group, your morality, your beliefs, your understanding, which is one of certainly more wholesome and good than those that are trying to assault, kill, rape, and steal from you. You can preserve those good ideas. And that's what I talk about, getting through the shit hits the fan on the other side. Who's going to be left? Right? Who's going to be cooperating, right? What level of system and understanding are we going to have? Right? We don't want to end up with the whole world behaving like Venezuela for the next 100 years. So do your very best. Get prepared. Thank you very much for supporting the channel and for watching this video. And remember, right? The world is becoming more predatory, whether it's in banking, government, professional in your work. If you're trying to do a good job, you'll notice predatory behavior. Socially, even in church, I hear about predatory practices in churches. Yes, even in churches. People put each other down. They search for social positioning and status. Relationships are very predatory now. What can I get out of this person? Can I take their stuff? Can I victimize them at some point in the relationship? To me, it is a very sad condition, but it's a condition that exists nonetheless. And I, for one, refuse to ignore it on the basis of, well, it's ugly, and then making the excuse that it's rare, and the lie that it can't affect me. But you might say that we're already taking those first couple steps down, even though shit hitting the fan hasn't been announced. Yeah, it's not announced. So it can't be happening, right? Why don't you talk to the family of those people who were killed and the family of those who have had their loved ones around the world? Right? Shit hasn't hit the fan around the world everywhere, yet everywhere we're seeing this predatory nature. Predatory nature of humans and what they can do and will do. Chance favors the prepared mind is yours. Prayers and thoughts to everybody. Godspeed and Semper Fi. Always faithful.